can start, folks.
Excellent. Welcome to the Balticon panel on Ending Your Saga. My name is Joshua Bilmes. I am the president of Jabberwocky Literary Agency. I've been an agent for leading authors in the fantasy and science fiction genres for 35 years, including Brandon Sanderson, Shlaine Harris, Nick Martell, who's one of our panelists right now, whom I met at Balticon a few years ago. Just lots and lots. And I will let the other panelists introduce themselves, and I'll start with the DH.
Good morning, everyone. I'm D.H. Aire. I'm an indie author and a member of SIFWA. My latest book that came out this month is Bigfoot is Not Your Friend. This is my 21st novel.
Hey, and next, John.
Hi, everybody. I'm John Walker. I'm author of the Stafford Chronicles. I'm currently working on book 14 of 21. So I have a definite end in sight, which is pertinent to this panel. Imagine that. Right now, I'm still working on that, and this is like my 100th year at Balticon. So.
Wow, that beats me by a few. Leslie?
Hi, I'm Leslie Penelope. I write epic fantasy and paranormal romance. My fantasy series is Earthsinger Chronicles, and it's got 4 novels and 3 novellas, and it ends this August. The final novel is coming out in August, Requiem of Silence. So I started out self-published, and then they were picked up by St. Martin's Press to be traditionally published, and I still self-publish the novellas. So I've got a 7-book series published different ways, which is confusing in all kinds of ways too.
Okay, and Nick?
My name's Nick Martel. I'm the author of the Mercenary King series. These are my 2 books right now, King Liars and The Two-Faced Queen. I'm published by Saga Press in the States. And yeah, I've had to write my 3rd book this year, and it's already handed in, and it was terrible during 2020, but you know, it's all good. That's always interesting when you get to end something, or at least get closer to the end.
So, I think I'm gonna start with Leslie, because you mentioned something in your introduction that's kind of, I think, interesting. To what extent has the kind of, very kind of mixed publication approach to your series informed, if it has at all, how you've planned to end it or the road to ending it?
Yeah, it's interesting when you're doing, my novellas are optional because I know that everyone is not going to know about them. So I had planned them to be optional from the beginning when I was originally self-publishing everything, but it would have been easier to link them together, like on the stores and everything then. So as I plotted every piece of it, it's like, okay, what is a story that you would read to get more information about the characters? They end up being backstory, like prequels, but prequels that directly affect the next novel. And so writing something that stands alone in some cases, or is optional to the entire series arc, can be difficult. And when it came to ending the series, it's like, well, I have to know that some people have read some of these things and not others. And so I'm kind of trying to bring a satisfying ending to both sets of readers, whether they've only done the novels or whether they've been there for the whole ride. And so part of it is kind of always the thing of when you have the next book and it's been a year since the last book, how much recapping are you doing? You're recapping not only for people who have read something and forgotten it, but who never read it in the first place. And that's always a really difficult balance to strike. And I did struggle a little bit with that trying to figure out, okay, I don't want to spend a lot of time recapping because some people are going to binge it too. You just never know how people are going to encounter the series. So I tried to strike the best balance that I could, keeping all of these different readers in mind.
Okay. And then kind of to follow up on one aspect of that, then, as you're heading toward the toward the final book coming out in a few months, to what extent does this ending reflect what you thought the ending would be when you started, and to what extent has that evolved over time?
The basic ending for me is the same. Like I didn't plot all the books ahead of time, but I had like an idea, like the kernel of what the arc was going to be. So like this is the big bad, and they're going to overcome the big bad, basically, like every story. But yeah, the actual journey was pretty different than what I thought it would be because of the changes I had to make along the way in the other books. And so like the big points, the points that I thought of like, oh, this would be a cool thing to happen. Most of those like main things happened, but yeah, the journey was really circuitous, and I had to, because I wrote myself into some corners and then I had to write myself out. And then I was like, oh, well, that didn't happen. I had like better ideas than the ideas I thought I was going to have and worked those in. So, and then there was one thing in the series, like the actual, because it's about two different groups of people who've been at war for 500 years, and one has magic and one doesn't. And, you know, there's a situation where there's a refugee crisis and, you know, they're pouring into this land. So I had to figure out the end of that. And it was still up in the air as to until like I wrote the fourth book as to what I was actually going to do with the very end of these two people, whether they really make a lasting peace or not, you know.
And then Nick, you know, you've had kind of, I mean, some of these issues. I mean, one of the things in the genre is whatever the author wants to do. The marketplace can also determine whether a series ends sooner or well after the author initially anticipated. So how have you been dealing with that?
Yeah, so what Josh was referring to is that, you know, the great publishing machine sometimes limits, and you can kind of dictate yourself how many books in a series you're going to write. So I had always planned my series to be 5 books, and I just currently wrote the 3rd one, still not knowing if I was going to do those 4 and 5 books. So I had to write essentially an ending without writing an ending. And that was an interesting thing kind of get around with. Because you're not going to know sometimes. Obviously, in different aspects like self-publishing or like hybrid publishing, you can make those choices and you can kind of set the pace. But in traditional publishing, that kind of was outside of my control. So my 3rd book, when I was writing, it was the end of the saga that could not be the end of the saga. And I had designed my series in reverse, where I actually started with the last book I wanted to write and then worked all the way back to how I wanted to do it. So it's this weird translation of like, well, do I save this thing I've been holding off on till the book that may never come, or do I write it the way I can do it here? And writing my 3rd book was a lot of contentions of like, what do I do here? What do I do now? And like, what will make the reader happy in case we don't get those 4 and 5 books? And it's you know, fun, great fun, delightful fun.
Would you have had a plan if it looked like you could have chosen to like write 20 of the books if you wanted? Like, would you have had a way to draw out the middle and the way to the end, or kept it?
I don't know. I find like books that are long, like that kind of length, really fascinating. I think John or DH could probably talk more about that, just because like, I don't know how I would keep the pace of a 20 book series up. Like that's terrifying. And like, I like, do you have like just mini arcs within like a long series? Like I'd be fascinated to hear about that.
So, shall we hear about that? John?
Me?
Oh,
Yeah. Or DH? Yeah.
We can rock, paper, scissors for it, DH. I mean, either way.
And you start.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, in fact, Nick actually touched on exactly how I'm doing the Stratford Chronicles. I'm doing it as essentially 3 arcs, almost like Star Wars, New Hope, Empire, Return of the Jedi, but no Ewoks. What I'm doing with it is it's 7 books per cycle. I call them cycles just to be fancy, and each one is essentially a contained story arc. Yeah, you can skip to book 8 and start there and go on and not miss excuse me, not miss not miss much as far as backstory, but that backstory is there. So I mean, I started this knowing the ending after, I mean, yes, 21 books later, once I hit book 21, I know the ending. I've already pretty much written in my head. I just need to throw the words on the page. But as far as keeping the pace, yeah, that's always tough, because the last thing you want is a reader to go, oh, and like that, and you're done. So you want to keep the reader going, whether it's an, oh, I hate you, or oh, this was awesome, or oh, you want that. You do want that so keeping the pace is very difficult, but it's a lot of fun.
So I did a 7-book series that spawned a 4-book next series. The 7-book, and the 4 books aren't done yet in terms of sequence. But when I looked at the 7 books, I first started by getting the first one published by a small press. Then another small press wanted to publish the 2nd book, which at that point I felt like going indie, because the first publisher really wasn't marketing the book the way I wanted. Then they offered me another contract to keep the book for another cycle. So the 7-book arc, I originally thought was going to be a 6-book arc, but once I got into book 6, I knew it would be way too long. And then book 7 was actually the longest book of the series. So I knew how the end was supposed to come. What I didn't expect is one of my beta readers not to respond on what they thought about the book after having beta read the others. Everything else they beta read. And then I'm waiting for their input on my last book, and they're not answering. So I emailed and said, is everything all right? Because the book is scheduled to be released at a certain date. And they said, you killed a character off. And I didn't know how to tell you that. I didn't know what to say. And I said, what? You killed someone's mother. I said, if their mother lives, will you tell me what you thought about the book? Oh, you'll let her live? You'll let her live? She's only 1,200 years old. Oh, that's wonderful. So I had to react to that, and I looked, and literally I felt that, I'd killed off a number of characters at the end, which were important characters to have their arc end for other things to go forward, to properly end. But I felt it was maybe a bit gratuitous to have this one character's mother, who was 1,200 years old, die. So she doesn't die. And then he said, oh, I love the book. It's a 5 out of 5 stars. That's what I'm going to give you when it hits Amazon. Oh, I loved it. I loved it.
So,
but the main pieces were all what I'd originally planned, even though I doubted myself, like, well, maybe it should go this way rather than that way, than the way I originally thought. But I actually left it the way I originally thought I was going to leave it.
I'd like to ask next, it's kind of like a 3-part question, and I'm going to ask it of each of you. It's The piano is about ending sagas. So part one is, what is the saga that you've just loved the ending of? Part two is, what is a saga that you hated the ending of? And, kind of tell us why. And then part three is, how has that informed your own writing? Kind of what you've taken from other things that you've read. So I'm going to start with John on this.
Okay, the one I loved the ending. I mean, if we include if we include TV, I'll say Farscape, but because that was just that was one of the best endings ever. A close runner up, and I'm preparing to get stuff thrown at me for this, was The Dark Tower. I love the ending. That's how it had to go. So now, one I hated, I'm gonna get stuff thrown at me for this, or just accolades for it. Game of Thrones. Yeah, yeah, shots fired.
I'm purposely asking a question that I hope will generate
Oh, good
some
job.
sparks. But
Well,
but
yeah,
so,
the Game of
so
Thrones, it ended. It was like nobody cared. What was the third one?
are you talking about the TV
The TV
series or the
series.
books?
Because it hasn't
And
finished
then the
yet.
third part is whether or how that has informed your own writing and how to end what you're doing.
Well, what you want? Oh, I'm sorry. The movie for Farscape,
For
which was
Farscape.
the Farscape movie.
Yeah.
But as far as the third part of your question, it told me that if I do not end it right, as in that it makes sense, that it's fun, that it ends like it's supposed to, then I might as well just not even write, because people will tear you apart for a stupid ending, and stupid endings do exist. I'm looking at most 1980s TV shows that just were like, hey, they walked into the sunset and that was it. Or Dr. Sam Beckett never found his way home. That was a terrible ending. And I was like, nope, not going to do it like that. Not going out like that. So.
Okay. Leslie, same question.
There's a series that was really kind of inspired my series. It's a YA series, but it's the Lumiere Chronicles by Melina Marchetta, and it starts with Finnegan of the Rock. And I loved the way it ended. I don't know that I think I read that she didn't actually plan all the other books. It's just because she kept writing them and it ended up being a trilogy. So she kind of back-ended her way into a trilogy that I thought was really satisfying. And then I agree, I did not like the Game of Thrones ending. Game of Thrones and then the last Infinity Endgame came out, when I was writing book 4, and those were in my head. I was like, I don't want my series to be, people to close the book and throw it against the wall. Like if Game of Thrones, the TV show, was a book, many people would throw it against the wall. So yeah, taking from those things. I also, maybe this is a hot take, but I didn't really love the end of Harry Potter. I stayed up, for like 24 hours straight reading the last book. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool, I guess. So, I was really trying to have something that's emotionally satisfying after. If someone has read all the books in your series, I think you kind of, and especially with the super long series, if you get them to book 21, chances are they're going to like it if they followed you there. But even like book 7 or book 4, whatever they've read, I want them to have a good experience. So trying to just incorporate those things that I liked and those things that I didn't, that just left me wanting in these other series. It was really top of mind for me.
Leslie, can I ask? Sorry, can I ask a question real quick? Was it the epilogue or is it just the ending in general of Harry Potter you didn't like?
I think
Yeah,
it was the
thank
epilogue. Yes, yeah. Like the ending is kind of where you thought it was going to go. Maybe if it had just been that, it would have been fine. But then you tack on this whole thing, and that epilogue is what you walk away with. It's the last thing in
Yeah.
your mind, and you're like,
DH?
So, Lord of the Rings is a classic ending of that trilogy, that story, that end of an epic. But do I really love it? Not really. There's things that, going off west and that's it. And even how when they return to the Hobbit community at the end and have to replay kind of what had gone before on a micro scale, I didn't really love that in the books. Though I was very satisfied with everything I learned from Lord of the Rings. The TV show DS9 had a wonderful ending that really had closure and goodbyes and a farewell party, and Captain Sisko is left with an opening to return in some form in another way in the future. I love that open-ended piece that says we're not ending Star Trek, we're not ending DSI completely, but this is where the arc of this 7 years went. What people have said about Game of Thrones, I have listened to people tell me how they loved the end of Game of Thrones. And I personally don't love the end of Game of Thrones. I would have taken it somewhere different. But everything, but it was like one aspect of that ending of the War of the Roses, where everyone would have to die at the end, isn't what I really love about repeating history in a fiction series.
Okay, and Nick, your turn.
All right, the best ending I think I've ever seen is Full Metal Alchemist. It's like an anime and a manga, but I stand by the fact that thing is the best ending because it's thematically, it comes full circle. It's thematically correct. It ends on like a very kind of tragic and also uplifting note, and I believe that's awesome. As for like an ending I hated, Game of Thrones, like I didn't hate it, but I just didn't feel like it was finished. Like at least the TV show, it almost felt like they put the book ending on the show ending without realizing what to get there. So, like, my roommates hated it. They yelled about it for like weeks afterwards. I was like, it felt like the book ending. I saw the book, but just not, I didn't get it in the show. But I didn't really hate it. I think an ending I disliked was kind of the end of Hunger Games, where I felt like the last book was kind of really underwhelming. And it wasn't like it was a bad ending. It just kind of was like, okay, it's over. And you put it down and you're just like, all right, I'm done with it. Compared to how I felt like ending it, right, reading the end of the first one, where you're like, oh, I want to know what happens next. I have to know what happens next. And endings are so hard. Like, and this is the only time I'll be like a little bit like ego. Like, I think I have really good endings. So like, I pride myself on my endings. So you never want to have the reader walk away and put the book down and be like, I don't know what happens next. And sometimes you have to end on different notes than you think you do to get that reader to leave fulfilled. Like Breaking Bad is also another great example of like a show at least that got an ending perfectly done. They pretty much stopped at the height of their popularity, and they just let all the readers be like, that's it, that's done. And they did like a movie afterwards that explored one of the characters. But it really is that kind of like, I'm ending it here. I need to end it here. I think that's really the thing I think about endings. Like, how do you get it to come full circle? And like, what are the themes you got and have to finish on them?
and I think that the Watchmen TV show, the recent one, had the perfect ending.
Yeah.
It's open-ended. But it was like sometimes that, you close the door, but you open a window or something and you give someone something to think about and chew on. And I'm glad they're not doing anymore. I hope they don't do anymore. It was one season and it was a perfect season as far as I'm concerned. So
I would like, all right, I would really like them to not do it. I would like them to do another season. But I would like them to go with another character, just like you said, open a window or whatever. And that's kind of what I really like. I like the and the journey continues endings, just so you're not, yes, this character story arc is ending. Like for my dude, his story ends at book 21. That's it. It's he's done. He's done. He's out. But I want to have there's another possibility to, the door is open for it. I'm not writing it, but the door is open for it.
Fan fiction.
So, so we've got one, just to check, one question we have in the Q&A. It sounds like most of the panelists have done endings that have been pretty true to what they did when they set out, that there hasn't been a lot of like just ripping out the ending and starting from scratch. Correct? Or does anyone have a ripped it up story? Okay.
Oh, you do?
I've had to rip up stories, but I haven't had to rip up the ending.
Okay. One question I'm gonna kind of tackle. I don't think that we have any panelists who've been like, can you make this series go longer and longer? And we don't, want an ending. But the answer to that is that yes, publishers will ask, or, pretty frequently, for a series to go longer than the author intended if the series is doing well. I don't think anybody would have walked away, let's say, from having more like Sookie Stackhouse books than the author had intended. And so that definitely happens. One really good question is, how much can you live unfinished and still have a satisfactory ending? And I'll start with, I think I'll start this one because the book's just about to come out, and ask Leslie on that one to start.
So I think you need to know what you have to wrap up. You have to know what you opened up, like the open arcs, character arcs and story arcs. So the things that I tried to leave open at the end were not the main question, like the story question. You go into the first book and it should be obvious, I think, if you're doing like a cycle, or, this is one story arc. And the question is, will these people live in peace together after 500 years of war? You have questions for each of the characters too. Those are the things I feel like should be wrapped up in order to have a satisfying ending. Other things like opening the window I was talking about is like little threads that, maybe if I want to come back in a few years. Right now I'm burnt out on the series. I've been writing these books for 8 years. And I knew it was going to be 4 traditionally published books. I had a 4-book deal initially. And so that was kind of it. And no one's asking for more, which is good. But I knew what I wanted to wrap up. And so, the open items are the things I want people to walk away with and maybe wonder about. And if I wanted to come back to it at some point, either with these characters or the next generation, and see where they ended up, where the events of this series pushed this world in 20 or 30 years, that could be interesting potentially. But yeah, those main arcs I think you should close.
Okay, John?
There will always be threads that we miss, even ones we don't realize we left. I say that as somebody who has gotten a piece of email saying, well, what happened to that? Who? It's my book and I don't even know who they're talking about. So those threads, I think, yeah, they're great story hooks, but I don't foresee me going back after 21. I'm good.
DH?
I don't close all threads because I have a lot of different characters I want to explore in other stories. But the other thing that's going on these days is reader magnets, which gives you the ability to take a side story and use it to draw in readers to your series by offering it. I'm using Story Origins. I've got 4 novellas that lead into 4 of my first books of series. Sometimes they actually lead into more because some of my books are related, and therefore one reader magnet leads in. But I can write a core story that I don't want to write a full novel on and provide that as a backstory. And you'll see the characters that have gotten mentioned in others' tales, or their back history, is now showing. I did that particularly with the story of a dragon's origin story, so that the dragon that you see in the novels, it had been woken up in one of my 11 books, but you didn't see it going to sleep with the curse that was laid on it. So I wrote that as a reader magnet, and that helped close, but also open opportunities for other stories that follow later on in the history of this planet and the history of these peoples.
And Nick, when you were, trying to kind of write the book 3 ending that wasn't really an ending, were you thinking more about what the readers would need, or what you would need, or like how were you trying to figure out what were the important things to leave finished or unfinished?
So with my third book, nothing really changed in my ending. Like I didn't rip out my ending just on the sole fact there might not be a 4 and 5. I always kind of had a plan where it's like, all right, if someone stops reading at 3, this is what they'll get. So I planned an arc kind of in those 3 books, like a smaller arc within wrapped around the 5 books. But I kind of think all stories naturally go unfinished to a point, that you kind of look at everything. Like I look at the endings that I truly adore, and not all the threads get wrapped up. Even when you look at something like the Wheel of Time, like not everything was wrapped up. There were still so many questions at the end of it. But we're never going to see those just because like the characters continue on without the reader knowing what happens. So I think when I was trying to create an ending, I wanted something to say like life just goes on. Like this arc is done. These characters or this setting or this thing is done, but the story continues and the world continues. And obviously, like you always kind of want to leave that like little breadcrumb where it's like, oh, maybe I'll come back here one day. Like I don't think any author could fully just like close everything. Even when you look at something like Harry Potter, like I remember when Harry Potter finished, J.K. Rowling was like, no, I'm never coming back to Harry Potter. And then people can debate on whether she should have or not with the Cursed Child. But the point stands, I don't think any writer could close the world off for good. I think it's kind of just leaving the ending in a place that you're content with maybe never coming back to it, and the reader's content with maybe never coming back to it. So you're all kind of in this half messy, like we're okay, but we're not okay with how it ends. And that was kind of the goal I wanted to do with what I was writing my third book.
Well, and so that's an interesting kind of taking off from what Nick said. What is a thread or character or situation that each panelist feels is dangling from a series that they've read, which they would most like to see picked up on? DH, is there anything you're hankering?
When David Weber ended the Honor Harrington arc, playing out the Napoleonic Wars and their aftermath, I wasn't left satisfied with where Honor ended up. And as I read David's comments that he had originally planned to kill Honor and have that ending be her children fighting the battle, and realized that wasn't going to work, probably for his fans and his publisher, I was still not left satisfied with how it came to an end. It was it was an odd story ending uh, with the slavers, and the whole thing was just, historically, I'm sure it made a lot of sense to David, but it left me with a lot of gaps of, yeah, history goes on and there's stories to tell from other people's lives and perspectives. And there was different things going on in the Honorverse, I know, but I wasn't left satisfied by it. I had to buy the book.
John, any answer from you for this?
Give me a minute. I'm still thinking.
Okay, Leslie.
Yeah, I'm the worst about remembering books. I think that if an ending isn't satisfying, it often isn't a thread that's dangling that bothers me. It's more like what DH was saying, where they chose to leave the character didn't feel natural, or it didn't leave me feeling good. It didn't feel like it had been, prefaced by everything that had come before properly. That's sort of usually what I'm left with. But yeah, I can't think of anything specifically where it was just like a question that they didn't answer. I'm sure that there have been. The thing that came to mind immediately was like the Sopranos ending, which was just like, bloop, we're just going to chop off. That's the way you can do it too. And people have a lot of feelings about that.
It's such a good ending.
Nick, would you?
Yeah. It's kind of like an inversion to question, but the third Fitz trilogy by Rob and Hobb terrified me. Not because I didn't want to read it. I actually still haven't read it. It's sitting on my shelf. I'm scared to read them. But the end of her second trilogy, without spoiling anything, had left a character I really cared about in an okay position, which for that series is pretty much as close as you're going to get to a happy ending. And I was terrified when I learned that there was another trilogy afterwards, because I was like, oh, there is a lot of stuff that's still left unexplored. But do I want to leave my characters like, oh, maybe only chance at a happy-ish ending to find out what happens? And I still haven't actually read the series. I love her. She's like one of my favorite authors, but sometimes I don't know if I want to follow the thread that the author leaves behind, where it's kind of like, yeah, maybe I'm okay with just stopping here, but I'm going to read it at some point and just, hate myself. But that's kind of a thread I'm happy that I got explored, but I don't know if I'm ready to explore it yet.
Okay, I got one. Josh, I got one.
Okay.
All right, finally, and okay, the Dune series, the very last, what was it? Sea worms. I don't know, something of Dune, and the spoiler alert. And Duncan Idaho just gets a Deus Ex Machina to just save everybody, and he's like, and it's like, and he just walks off into the sunset. And it was just like, I was looking at, I was like, I will never read another. I will not read anything. I don't care if it's a short story. I don't care if they explain it all. This is a thread that they just left hanging and going, hey, guess what? We made money. So yeah, I'm very dissatisfied with that thread. So they need to.
And
finish.
then, John, you mentioned how you've constructed your work kind of like the Star Wars series with the, group of related arcs. So that ties in a little to a question from Veronica in the Q&A. Were you doing that because it was like creatively what you wanted to do? Is it something that you thought would work well with the publishing strategy for the books, a combination of both, some other reason entirely?
It was mainly creative. It started off creative, and what's good is after I figure out, oh, hey, I can put these in in arcs. I can bundle them together and publish, because I'm an indie publisher, so I, don't have a lot of juice in that realm. So, but I can put it all together, first seven, second seven, third seven, all in all in little packages and little bundles. So yeah, that helped. That came later, but creatively, it was initially, this is how this is how the story goes, and if the story doesn't go, I mean, if the story didn't accommodate that, I probably would have forced it to accommodate it because it would have just made more sense in my head.
Okay. One thing I'm a little curious about is sometimes there's a series where you think it's ended and then there's more. Do people have any kind of, like a series where the house guest returned and it was like unwelcome or really exciting? And I see Leslie, you have some for that.
I was thinking of, some authors I look every couple of years to see if they have a new book out. And Kristen Kishore is one of those. So Graceling, she had 3 books that came out like 10, 15 years ago, and these were YA fantasies. And then I just saw that, I guess last year, there's a 4th one. And part of me was like, I really loved those books. Those were really like foundational to me when I was reading YA fantasy. I don't read YA anymore, but like, did I need another one? I mean, as much as I loved them, sometimes it's like, and they were like companion books. So it wasn't an arc. And so it wasn't like a trilogy, but it was still like, I don't know. I'm not in the same place. Sometimes I go back to books I loved and, that I read 10 years, 15 years ago, and I just don't have the same appreciation for them. So that's kind of part of it. It's like, I've moved on and I don't know that I needed that, but also I was kind of happy. I was like, well, I probably will read it just because I did love those books so much. So yeah, and there's another series where I stopped reading in the middle. It was Lainey Taylor's Daughter, Smoke and Bone. The first book was amazing. The second book was like terrifying, and I was traumatized. And I'm like, I'm not reading the third one. Like you did so much in that second book that I'm happy. I'm going to leave them here. Everyone's still alive for the moment, and I don't want to know what you have. You lose trust, I think, sometimes as an author when they do something that feels either crazy or just unmotivated. And so when more books come, even if it is a trilogy and I don't know the end of the story, I make up my own ending, and I'm okay with that.
That's
Nick,
what we do. Okay.
I think it's I mean, Cursed Child was probably this one that keeps sticking out to me. I'm like, I regret reading that book. But I think one of the more recent ones that got me, I can't even remember the name of it. I can't remember, but I find that often, like, especially in series that sometimes I only read the first book of, that like I just sometimes I'm like, oh right, the 4th is out right now, I gotta go get it, and I'm just like, but there's so many other books I have to read and things where sometimes it's my own kind of like not laziness, but like my own kind of TBR pile slowly crushing me. I'm like, oh man, this author's released like 5 books when I'm on their second still, and I got to catch up again. But I think there's just so much coming out. Sometimes it can get overwhelming.
I think the series was called Sword of Truth that just kept going on, and there had been a book that was the ending, and then there was another book. And and when I read the other book, I said, no, the other book was the end.
Why would you do that though? I mean, I know money's nice, but then you just get
The
people
publisher didn't give him a
hating you.
choice.
yeah.
What do you do at that point?
And then, and we may have time for like one more question. We've got one last one in the current Q&A queue. Any of you get to the ending and really wish you'd done something different 3 books back because of the wonderful thing you thought of that actually doesn't work with the pre-existing? books that you have written?
I think there's ideas that come. Like when I write myself into a corner, I'm like, oh, I can't do that because this book is on the shelf and people have read it and it would contradict that. So sometimes you try to find creative ways around that problem if you really love the idea. I haven't had it happen like with the entire ending, but there's definitely things that when you're writing and things have been published and you can't go back and change them, that you're like, do I just give up on this? Or do I try to, work it in and have some discovery made in the world, like, oh, now I said you couldn't do it, but surprise, they've discovered a way to do that, or a lot of times it's like magic system stuff where I was like, I said you couldn't do that, but I want them to do it now. And it's like, is it worth it? Is there a way that I can elegantly make this happen? Or it would just be like a kludge and a sledgehammer. And so there are ideas you have to sort of give up on because you don't want to lose that trust and you don't want to just like force things into the story. I said some of the things that, you read it and it feels forced. And that's not a good feeling. So it's like, oh, maybe next time, like I'll store that in my ideas pile for the next book.
Yeah, I'm with Leslie. I usually just store them away if I can't make them work. I'm like, all right, one day I'll do this again.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. The thing is, though, you can break your rules that you set up as long as you do it in an entertaining way. And I can give you a perfect example of that. Doctor Who. Doctor Who breaks. It's like rules. We don't need rules where we're going. I can't do a broad northern accent or even a Scottish accent. But the point is, you can break if you can figure out a way to say, hey, these rules, we're breaking them because we can, because we're gods of our own little worlds, and go from there. You can really just kind of, you can make it work. But if the story suffers, no, toss it up here and go on with your life.
So we've got just a couple minutes left. So I'm gonna ask people, what is a current series that you were just really excited to see the ending for? DH, start with you on that.
I'm not currently reading anyone else's books. I hate to say it.
So your own, okay. Nick.
There's a lot I could come up with. I think Evan Winter's The Burning series is really entertaining. I'm excited to see there's 2 books left in that. Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archive, like the next 5th book. I'm excited to see how that ends. There's so many, like Ken Liu's the Dandelion Dynasty. I think his last book's coming out this year. I can go on and on. There's so many good books coming out.
Okay. Leslie?
Yeah, I'm terrible with books off the top of my head. And I try to buy books and to support, but I can't read series that are, because my memory is too bad. Like, so unless it's ending, then I usually start it, once I've collected all the books. But I am not going to be able to come up with anything right now. If I do, I'll let you know in the next 30 seconds.
All right. Okay. And John, do you have anything?
I have a couple, actually. Paul Cooley's Derelict Saga that he's publishing soonish. Terry Mixon's Empire of Bones. I'm waiting for that ending. Is there another book? Is there another Dresden Files book coming out, or is
there's like 6 of them left, I think.
6 left? I thought he was.
His
almost
plan was
done.
20 books arc.
And then this ends with an apocalyptic trilogy.
Wow.
He's been working on.
I have a
he's
lot
been working off his arc
that.
for years.
I know. So I'm really waiting for stuff like for that ending, and whether I'm going to praise or cry or both at the end of it. So, but those are the 3 I'm looking forward to reading and finishing soonish.
So we're at the end of our 50 minutes together. I'd like to thank all of my excellent panelists. It's been a great conversation with all of you. So some of them are heading to the Discord. I haven't figured out how to navigate there yet. I will do some AMA on my Twitter at Jabbermaster for the next few minutes if anyone has any questions for me to pick up on there. So again, thank you all of you. It's been a great start to a rainy Saturday for me to be talking to everybody. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.